Welcome back to another episode of Model Evolution. This week I wanted to look at Adepta Sororitas, or Sisters of Battle, depending on how old you are. The Adepta Sororitas I thought were a fairly smaller line, but actually within the past few editions they've gotten a lot of really good upgrades. And in previous editions like 2nd and 3rd, they had some really interesting models to begin with. So I think this week's video will be really interesting, looking back at some of the older models and seeing how some of the new models really carry the same designs. So without further ado, let's jump right into it and look at the Sisters of Battle. Let's start with the Canoness, one of the high-ranking leaders of the Sisters of Battle. This one came out most recently in 10th edition and is the Canoness with the jump pack. I think this model looks really good. I like the armor and I like the hood, and I especially like the jump pack. This is the Canoness I'm most familiar with from 8th edition. I always found the crossbow bolt pistol to be super interesting. I'm not a huge fan of the robes in this design, but I think everything else looks pretty great. This is another Canoness from 8th edition. This one's pretty good as well. I think the sword design here is really interesting. You don't see a lot of hilts like that in Warhammer 40k, I feel like. The super giant raised shoulder pads are quite interesting as well. And this is the Canoness model from 4th edition Warhammer. This one's pretty great, especially the prayer book that she has there. But I will say that the pointy chest piece on the armor is a little bit crazy. Let's check out the Seraphim, one of the most elite of the Adepta Sororitas models. These ones are from 8th edition, and I think they look pretty great. They look like pretty classic Sisters of Battle that are really just having their special jump packs. But I think the option of the helmet or the hood or the just hair I think is great. And I also quite like how some of them are dual-wielding bolt pistols, or even dual-wielding flamers. These Seraphim are from 2nd edition, and they honestly hold up. Again, we have the dual-wielding pistols, which are pretty great, but you can obviously tell that they didn't know how to make the flying models look like they're actually flying here. Seems like they're supposed to be standing on really skinny rocks. Maybe that's just a weird decision with the paint scheme. Either way, I think this is a pretty good example of the Adepta Sororitas model designs not really changing that much through the years. These guys look pretty legit. Next, let's check out the Retributor squad, the heavy hitters of the Adepta Sororitas. I like these models quite a lot. I'm always a sucker for some big guns. I especially like the multi-meltas. I think they're just very classic for the archetype of the Sisters of Battle. And of course the little cherub models don't hurt either. Those are just cool to have. This Retributor is from 2nd edition and is carrying a heavy flamer. I like all the different skulls they have on the armor and the gun, and I also like the mask that she has. The flamer here is definitely a clunkier design, but it still looks pretty decent. Here is a Retributor with the heavy bolter. Again, looking pretty good, but very clunky. Another 2nd edition Retributor, this time with the helmet design. When I saw this, I was really surprised how similar this helmet is to the modern day helmets. It looks identical to me. I also like the patina design they did here on the multi-melta. I think it's a pretty good design for a model from the 90s. Next, let's check out Saint Celestine, a super interesting and important character in the Sisters of Battle lore. I think this model is pretty great, especially the doves that she has flying by her side, and I'm always impressed in the different ways that they can make the flying models airborne. So in this one, the prayer scrolls I think is a perfect way to have Saint Celestine up in the air like that. I think her wings and the golden armor all look really good as well. This is a pretty well done model, especially being so tall. It needs to really stand out from the rest of your army, but she isn't actually that much bigger than the rest of the sisters, so I think this is really well done. This Saint Celestine from 3rd edition perhaps isn't as well done in my opinion. The cherubs are very cool, but she isn't really as much of an action pose. Her armor here looks really good, and so does the sword, and she actually is off the ground being held up by the prayer scrolls again, so that's pretty well done. I just definitely think that the new model is a bit of an upgrade, especially considering how important this character is and how much bigger that model makes her look. Let's check out Penitent Engines next. These guys have some crazy lore. They are piloted by the bodies of guilty heretics who are driven insane and feel that the only way they can be forgiven is by dying in battle. So by giving them these giant suits of armor, they are sent out on the front lines to do as much destruction as they can before they are ultimately destroyed. It's very dark, but it really does fit the vibe of what the Sisters of Battle are all about, which is brutal religious fervor. I do quite like this model. I think it's really interesting looking and very unique from the rest of anything else in Warhammer. As far as mechs go, honestly, Sisters of Battle have some of the coolest, and this one is really well done. This earlier Penitent Engine is from 3rd edition, and I honestly think the new one is better. This one gets the idea across, but I think the new one gets more of the design archetypes of the Sisters of Battle, more of the religious iconography. Here is a squad of Dominions from 8th edition, some of the more close-ranged elite units. These are pretty classic Sisters of Battle with just some special weapons, but they look really good here. And here's the Dominion with a flamer from 2nd edition. Again, this model is from 2nd edition, but the designs have stayed so similar. The helmet looks nearly identical to how they look today, and so do much of the robe and the shoulder pads. Here are the Battle Sisters from 8th edition. These are the most basic, classic infantry unit in the army. This is what I think of when I hear Sister of Battle or Adepta Sororitas. These guys have the classic armor, the classic bolt rifles, and they're very cool models in my opinion. And here are some Battle Sisters from 2nd edition. Definitely clunkier, definitely less detailed, but the designs are nearly identical. Looking back at the other videos I've made on other factions, usually the earliest prototype of a model is so much different from what it looks like today. But Sisters of Battle have really stayed so similar throughout 25 years. The Adepta Sororitas also have some of the most unique and cool vehicles in my opinion, especially this Immolator here. It appears to just be on the base of a Rhino, but it is actually a specialized vehicle. It looks very similar to the design of the Rhino, but it has a lot more going on obviously. Of course it has those twin-linked heavy flamers, lots of stained glass and gold features, and of course the flying cherub on the back there. I think this tank is pretty great. I've always been a big fan of their vehicles. This Immolator is from 3rd edition. Similar kind of design with the twin-linked heavy flamers and a bit of a stained glass feature up there near the turret, not nearly as well designed as the newer version, but still there. This is a Forge World Immolator from 2002. This to me just looks like a basic Rhino with some twin-linked heavy flamers on it, but whatever. Still doing something. And this is the earliest Immolator from 2nd edition. Still has the twin-linked heavy flamer turret on the front. That has really stayed the same since the beginning. Find that very cool. This Rhino design is certainly clunkier, but I think it looks pretty good, especially for 2nd edition. The Exorcist, another one of the coolest vehicles in all of Warhammer 40k. This one came out in 8th edition, and again, it's kind of just a Rhino base with lots of extra features going on. This time, instead of a heavy flamer, it has a bunch of missiles in the pipe organ. I think this model looks absolutely fantastic. I love the cherubs. I love the sister playing the pipe organ. I love the grate. I love all the fire features. I think it's awesome. And here is a 3rd edition Exorcist tank. I've never seen this model before. I didn't know that the newest version actually had something to base off of. I can tell here the ideas came across really strong. The pipe organ looks really good, and all the special features on the side of the tank look really good, but I can tell that the new version really just hit it out of the park. And this is supposed to be an Exorcist from 2002. Again, I think this is from Forge World. I guess you can tell here that the Exorcist got its missiles, but that's about all it got. Here is the Hospitaller from 8th edition, basically the apothecary for the Sisters of Battle. I quite like this model. It seems like she's praying over her fellow sister, and the doves carrying the prayer flags look awesome. The Order of Hospitaller are supposed to be a non-militant order, which is something really unique and you don't find very often in Warhammer 40k. Warhammer 40k, a non-militant, I don't know. Very rare. And here is a Sister of Hospitaller Order from 3rd edition. I like that the long white robes have stayed the same, but otherwise you can't really tell that she's non-militant other than the fact that she just doesn't have a weapon. Still a cool model, but I would probably add something like a med kit or something in front of her just so you can get across that she's supposed to be kind of the medic of the army. The Repentia Squad, another dark kind of piece of the Sisters of Battle lore here. Repentia are supposed to be made up of Sisters of Battle who have somehow failed or disobeyed and seek to redeem themselves through battle. Again, most likely through death. The models are very cool here though, as you can tell they've been stripped of all their armor and just given a basic chainsword. Very much a glass cannon type of unit. And I think it gets across here pretty well. These are some Repentia from 3rd edition. I think these are pretty cool. I like how it seems like the cloaks that they used to wear have been torn open and they're kind of wrapping themselves with those. And I think both the poses are pretty interesting. Here is a Dialogus from 8th edition. This is another non-militant order of the Sisters of Battle. They sort of fulfill the scribe type of archetype. I think this model from 8th edition is pretty cool. I really like the book that it has behind it and the kind of scroll writer that it has in front of it. And this Dialogus is from 3rd edition. I just wanted to show this because I think the mouth is so funny on her. And I also really think that her staff is hilarious. It seems like it has some kind of speaker at the top of it. But I am really impressed here with the detailed writing on this paint job. They did a pretty good job, especially that little dark skull they did in the bottom there. Pretty fun model. Of course, I have to do some honorable mentions. One of my favorite model in this army is the Triumph of St. Catherine. Bringing a procession onto the battlefield, I think is so cool. I'm actually not super familiar with the rules of this unit. I probably should check those out. Would be very curious to see what this actually does in battle. But I just think it's so cool to have this as a set piece model. I would definitely keep this on the shelf somewhere prominently positioned. This is the newest model for the Sisters of Battle. Aveline just came out in June of 2024. I believe this model is a tie-in to a book, and I'm not entirely sure if she actually has her own rules. I don't think that she does. But either way, it's a very cool model, and if I was a Sisters of Battle collector, I think I'd have to pick this up just for a centerpiece model. This is one of my favorite models from this army as well, Canoness Viridian. I think that this is just such a classic model. It's based off of a very old and I think one of the earliest drawings for the Sisters of Battle. I love how closely tied it is to this painting here. This illustration is done by John Blanche, who's done some of the most iconic paintings for Warhammer 40k. Here's a collection of some of his work. He has done some really classic and good stuff. One of my favorites there is that Black Templar 3rd edition box art. So I think it's really cool that Viridian got her own model after being based off of that painting, and I think it's really well done. I think it looks great. And this here is the oldest model I could find for the Sisters of Battle. This is supposed to be a flag bearer, a banner bearer. Obviously you can tell that it's metal, unpainted, but I just think it's cool to see the oldest model I can get my eyes on. Thank you very much for watching this video and checking out the Sisters of Battle with me. Let me know down in the comments below if you have any fun facts about these models, or if you want to pick up any of the old models that I showed off today. Thanks a lot for hanging out with me and watching this video, and take care.